This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. We are here with our old friend, Chef Jason Parsons.
How are you? With the old friend already, make you feel old.
Chef Jason Parsons down at Peller Estates Winery in Niagara on the lake. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm in the middle of Ice Wine Festival, so it doesn't get much better than that.
Fantastic. Now, the first question I have for you in this in-depth interview is, how did you get your start in the business?
Oh, I got to go way back, but it's interesting actually. Is I've been surrounded by the hospitality business all my life. My uncle was the general manager of the Chewton Glen for 25, almost 30 years, and the Chewton Glen was a Michelin star, Relais and Chateau, top 10 country house hotels in the world, and this was in the UK. So as a kid, there's pictures of us, picnicking around the Chewton Glen and wandering through the kitchens. But I had no desire to do that. When we came to Canada, we actually moved here because my parents opened a business. Mm-hmm. They're actually selling antiques, bringing them over from the UK. So I always loved the idea of business. I wanted to do the same as my parents. I wanted to drive a Porsche, carry a briefcase, and wear a suit. That was my priority. How naive was I? But what happened was I ended up getting a job when I was 14 at Lulu's Roadhouse in Kitchener-Waterloo. Okay. A lot of people will remember that place because they did a lot of bad things there.
Really?
Yes. It had the longest bar in the world. It was held, I think, something like 5,000-6,000 people, and I was washing glasses, and then they end up getting rid of glasses, go to plastic, and they threw me in the kitchen. I was doing, and I hate to say garbage can, but garbage cans full of lettuce, like 3 or 4 of those a night. We were doing, baked potatoes. It was really bad. I was microwaving lobster tails. That's how bad it was.
Good Lord.
But I still loved that whole, the craziness in the kitchen, and actually within a year and a half, by the time I was 16, I was kitchen manager. I think nobody else wanted the job. And there was 15 people in the kitchen. We were doing close to 2,000 meals a night. Again, really scary stuff. And I was overseeing it, and I had no idea what I was doing. And at the time, Langdon Hall was just being built in Cambridge. And what they did is they took a lot of the staff from Langdon Hall and they sent them to the Chewton Glen where my uncle worked to train and to kind of see, establish what they want to do at Langdon Hall. So that's how I found out about it. So I thought, hey, I'm going to go up there and maybe I'll apply and become kitchen manager because I have no idea about the industry. And I went up there, and that's when I met Nigel Didcock, who is my mentor. He is the guy that I'm here because of him. It was unbelievable. He told me about the kitchen. He offered me an apprenticeship, which I was like, what is this apprenticeship all about? And that was also when I met a good friend of mine, Jeffrey Bracon, who was the general manager. And so I remember Jeffrey pulling me aside and telling me all about this and what the industry was all about and how it would be a 3-year program, and they'd put me through school. And I was like, sure, sounds good. No idea what I was getting myself into. First day walking into a kitchen surrounded by Michelin star chefs who are yelling at me because I'm peeling shallots wrong and things like that. But I think coming from that business, wanting to be business background, I always wanted to compete. I always wanted it. So no matter how terrible I was at it, I wanted to do it right and I wanted to push. And that's how I got into the industry. And I literally did my full apprenticeship at Langdon Hall under Nigel.
So that must have been quite a steep learning curve for you.
It was crazy. It was, I'll tell you, Nigel is an amazing teacher, but he's not those European guys that yell and scream. He's a motivator. He is a guy that gets really into your head and really gets you to be passionate about things. But what's worse, or the bad side of that, is then you don't want to let him down. He was the guy that could look across the room at you and just look at you, and you felt like you would just fail.
Right.
And so he really was there for me, but at the same time, there was a lot of great chefs out of that place, and they were all like executive chefs now. And I think it was pretty much put in my whole life. As soon as I came out of high school, I went right there. I was there every day. I lived in staff accommodation, so you're going in at 8 o'clock in the morning. We had our break from 3 till 5, which most days it was either the chef said you're playing soccer outside or you're doing prep, so we could play soccer. And then you'd work till like 12 o'clock at night. Or you'd be on the breakfast shift and you'd show up at 6 o'clock and then supposed to be going home at 3, and then someone called in sick and you'd still work till 12 o'clock at night. I loved it though. It was like a family. Like they sucked you right in. And I think the one thing that I've known of myself throughout my entire career is I love food. I've really become passionate about learning all about different ingredients and the quality of ingredients. But I think what makes me a really good chef is the fact that I also love being a chef. I love the engagement between the team in the kitchen and the motivation and someone that's struggling and everybody rallies around them, and even the making fun of each other and the mocking of each other. But that whole team environment, it's a family, and that's why I love it.
And how did you go from Langdon Hall to finding yourself at Peller Estates?
Oh, it's a long journey, I can tell you that. One of the greatest things that Nigel told me was, he said, get a great foundation, know what you're all about, understand the core, understand the cooking, and then get out there and travel. And more importantly, and back in those days, there was jobs aplenty, so it was really a year to 18 months and then move on and move on and move on. So
right.
Yeah. So I went from there and I went to the Shooting Glen in England and actually worked there for a year.
Okay.
So I worked at the Michelin Star there. From there, I actually came back because Nigel was in Toronto and did Sutton Place for a while. I went back to England and worked at Cliveden, which is where what's her name? Meghan Markle, ever just got, just before the wedding, they showed her at the hotel.
Oh,
that
yes,
was the
yes,
hotel.
yeah.
But this was an amazing place because it was 1-star Michelin again, but it was the old home of the Prince of Wales. It was 360 acres on the Thames. Very old school, very English-driven cuisine, silver service. So you learned about the real details of turning vegetables and things like that, classics, right? And after that, I was really fed up with that kind of almost industry-structured environment.
I understand, yes, yeah.
So I took off and went to Bermuda. And I lived in Bermuda for a year and a half, and we were pulling 90-pound tunas out of the back of a boat, and dealing with wahoo and the spiny lobsters and stuff like that, and learning about even though it's not Caribbean, they still do a kind of a Caribbean style cuisine.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing, and really of just what I've done through my career is I've said, what do I want to learn next? What style of food or whatever, and then I look for a chef that does that, and I would go work for them. So. Funny enough, though, after Bermuda, I came back and went back to Langdon as a sous chef. Always loved that property. Had as part of my heart. It still does today. And I did that for a while. And while I was there, I started doing stages. I did a stage with Charlie Trotter, which was just mind blowing. And just from there, I actually ended up coming down to work at Hillbrand with Tony DeLuca, and that was my introduction to wine country.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because Tony was a chef de partie with me at Langdon when I did my apprenticeship, so I knew him for a long time. And that's when it all changed for me, it really did. It's funny because I always say that Nigel taught me my passion for the industry, and then working at a couple of Michelin stars, I learned the discipline of the industry. But I feel like when I came back to wine country, it was the next step. It was the evolution of, this is not a job, this is not just a career, this is my life, this is who I am. And people always talk about, are chefs born into being a chef? I don't think I was, because I didn't know what I wanted to be as a kid. And yet, now, 20, 30 odd years later, I could not do anything else. This is who I am, and so I worked with Tony for a good year and a half, and at that point, a good friend of mine who I met at Cliveden, Frank Dodd, was working in Amsterdam with Albert Roux. So I went and hung out with him for a bit and did a stage with Albert Roux. And that's when he was going to come over and he opened up a restaurant for Michael Bonaccini in Toronto, and it was Biff's. So I went with Frank. And I left Frank and I went to Biff's, and we did 6 months there. And we opened a restaurant from the ground up. And it was awesome. To go in with Michael, who is very, I want this way, and you're painting the walls yourself, and you set up the line, and that night you're taking apart the gas and moving the line around and reinstalling the next day because you want to try it. But I learned a lot about actually running an entire kitchen at that point.
Yes.
And that's when Frank left, and it was like, okay, what do I want to do? And I thought, well, maybe it's time. And the Millcroft Inn were looking for an executive chef. And I had no idea what I was walking myself into. I tell my kids now, my first head chef position was the most terrifying thing I've ever done, and yet it was also the most amazing feeling. I was at the Millcroft for a little over 4 years, but I remember the first day I walked in there. I've come from kitchens that is it's silent, you can hear a pin drop, right? And I'm walking down the stairs at 8 o'clock in the morning to get, most of the crew's there at 9. And there was a young kid back there, and he's in this little garage area, and he's looking up at this shelf of all these CDs and a big boom box. And I'm like, hey, how you doing? And I think his name was Dustin. I said, I'm Jason, I'm the new chef. Because I didn't even get a formal introduction. It was, there you go, And I said, what are you up to? Where do you work? He goes, well, I'm on garde manger. He says, I'm just picking out the tunes for the day. And at that point in my head, I'm thinking, okay, what kind of chef do I want to be? Do I need to establish these rules now or not? You know, so I said to him, I said, listen, mate, I'm really sorry. I said, but I don't really appreciate music in the kitchen, so I'm just gonna. And I grabbed his boombox, and I remember walking through the rest of the kitchen, and all the other chefs are lined up looking at me, and I'm just like head down, walking the office because I've already ruined it on the first moment. But quickly did I was able to actually hire my own team, rally behind them, and we completely redesigned the kitchen. And we took the Millcroft from being a prime rib buffet kind of place, and we went right into farm to table. You know, I found local organic greenhouses that were bringing me in beautiful greens. There was one place, he had the 7 stages of his he called it his compost. But it would basically from harvest all the way around to making the soil back to where it was, and it would move. So it was the most beautifully run farm. There was local potato farms, it was honey, all the vegetables. I would go down to the bakery and I would work with them to bake bread, and then we eventually evolved to actually making our own bread. That's when I was like, I'm a kid in a candy shop because it's mine. And if I want to put a herb garden out back, I can put a herb garden out back. And that's where I've been really blessed with my career, because after 4 years of that, the chef from here moved on, and I remember Mark Turns, who was the GM at the time, he knew me from Langdon Hall days, and he came to me and said, you know, you want to come back to wine country? And I'm like, definitely, right? But I've always been blessed with places that have managed me in the way of, we hired you for what you do, and we want to empower you to do that. You know, yeah, I'm accountable for costs, and I'm accountable for budgets, and quality and standards and things like that. But I've always had a lot of freedom, and I know a lot of chefs don't have that. And so I think that's why I've been here now 14 years.
Wow, 14.
Yeah,
14.
you know, and I mean, I could tell you all about the changes we've done here, but that 14 years has really made me realize that I don't need to go anywhere else. If things aren't working or things aren't the way they should be, that's my fault,
right?
And I need to change it.